Imagine standing at the edge of a medieval harbor. The morning mist curls around wooden masts as gulls cry overhead. The air smells of salt, smoke, and spice. On the docks, sailors shout in a dozen languages, while porters haul crates heavy with silk, ivory, and gold. There were no banks, no airplanes, no stock markets. The ocean itself was the highway of wealth. Whoever ruled the sea ruled the world. Before global trade had a name, these harbors were its beating heart. From the blue waters of the Mediterranean to the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean, ships carried not just goods, but entire civilizations. Ports were where kingdoms met, and where fortunes were born. In the Middle Ages, power didn't sit in marble palaces or royal treasuries. It floated on the tide. Every empire understood that control of a port meant control of destiny. The Doge of Venice, the caliphs of Cairo, the emperors of China all built their greatness on the movement of ships. A single harbor could decide the fate of nations. The sound of sails cracking in the wind was the sound of money moving across the world. At dawn, the port of Venice shimmered like a jewel on the sea. The city seemed to float, its marble palaces reflected in the lagoon. Yet behind its beauty lay hard commerce. Every canal was a corridor of profit. Here merchants counted coins by candlelight, recording each transaction in books more sacred than scripture. Venice was not built on land or faith. It was built on trade. By the 13th century, this floating republic had become Europe's greatest marketplace. Ships from Constantinople, Alexandria, and Flanders arrived daily, their holds stuffed with silk, glass, and spices. Venetian merchants didn't just buy and sell. They invented systems to control risk: contracts, insurance, early banks. They turned trade into science. The government kept ledgers so precise that every ounce of gold, every bolt of silk, was tracked like treasure. The wealth of Venice glittered in the mosaics of St. Mark's Basilica and the marble of the Doge's Palace. But its true strength lay in numbers, in the invisible network of credit and trust that reached from its canals to the markets of Cairo and the bazaars of Damascus. In a world without modern finance, Venice had already built one. Sail south across the sea, and the winds carry you to the great ports of Egypt, Alexandria and Cairo, twin gateways between East and West. Here, the ships of the Indian Ocean met the caravans of Africa. The air was thick with the smell of cinnamon and pepper. Men from India, Africa, and Arabia crowded the wharves, their robes bright in the desert sun. Cairo's merchants were masters of letters and numbers. Jewish, Muslim, and Coptic traders created systems of credit long before European bankers dreamed of such things. A merchant could send a shipment of spices to Damascus or Venice without touching a single coin. Paper promises, signed, sealed, and honored, replaced bags of gold. Cairo's scholars studied mathematics to perfect the art of exchange. Under the shadow of its great mosques, faith and finance worked hand in hand. Alexandria, meanwhile, was called the treasure house of Africa. Its warehouses overflowed with ivory, pearls, and fine cloth. Ships from the Red Sea unloaded goods from India and China, which were then carried north to Europe. The Red Sea acted like a funnel, pouring the wealth of Asia straight into Egyptian hands. Every crate, every coin was taxed by the Sultan's men, and those taxes built empires. But further east, beyond the deserts and the monsoon winds, lay a harbor so vast that foreign visitors called it the Eye of the World. Guangzhou, known to medieval travelers as Canton, was the crown of the Song dynasty. To step into its docks was to step into another universe of trade. Here, the ships were giants, wooden cities that dwarfed the vessels of Europe. Merchants from over 80 lands lived in its foreign quarter: Persians, Arabs, Indians, Malays, and Southeast Asians. The docks stretched for miles, buzzing with the sound of hammers and bells. Trade was not chaos here, it was precision. The Song government ran a customs office that recorded every ship, every cargo, every coin. Taxes were collected with mathematical order. The Chinese had invented paper money, a miracle of commerce that made trade faster and safer. Gold and silver no longer weighed down caravans. Instead, faith in a written promise moved wealth across oceans. Arab travelers wrote home in awe, describing a city where gold was measured by the boatload and porcelain by the mountain. They said the ships of China were as large as palaces, their sails as tall as towers. Guangzhou's power was not built on conquest, it was built on trust. In a world often ruled by swords, the Song dynasty ruled by law. Merchants knew that their property and contracts were protected. This made trade flourish on a scale unseen anywhere else. Each tide brought profit. Each ledger recorded a fragment of empire. Yet even the grand harbors of China had rivals. Far across the sea, the city of Calicut on India's Malabar coast thrived as the fragrant capital of the medieval age. Here, the air itself was wealth. The smell of pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, and nutmeg rolled through its markets like invisible gold. The Hindu king, the Zamarin, ruled wisely, allowing traders of every faith to dock in safety. Muslims, Jews, Christians, and Chinese shared the same shore. Their ships brought silk, silver, horses, and ceramics, and left with spices worth their weight in treasure. Chinese fleets under Admiral Zheng He once anchored here, their decks stacked high with porcelain and silk, traded for black pepper prized in every palace of Europe. In Calicut, wealth was measured not in coins, but in scent. The richer the aroma, the greater the fortune. Spices were more than food. They were symbols of power, proof that distant worlds could be reached and mastered. The city's prosperity drew explorers like Vasco da Gama centuries later, all chasing the same legend, the port where gold flowed like water. Sail west again, and the winds carry you along Africa's coast to Kilwa and Sofala, two cities built from coral and crowned with domes of gold. These were the African mirrors of Venice and Calicut. Their wealth came not from silk or spice, but from the earth itself, from rivers filled with gold dust and mines deep in the interior. Caravans wound down from the lands of Great Zimbabwe, carrying gold and ivory to the sea. There, Swahili merchants, a blend of African and Arab heritage, ruled the markets. They built mosques of coral stone and palaces with carved wooden doors. Traders from Arabia and India filled the harbors, exchanging cloth and ceramics for the glitter of Africa's rivers. The traveler Ibn Battuta wrote of Kilwa with astonishment, "No city on the coast of Africa is more beautiful or wealthier than Kilwa." Sofala, further south, was the golden mouth of this trade, the port through which the riches of the continent poured into the hands of merchants from every corner of the known world. To the north, Constantinople stood like a gate between continents. The city guarded the Bosporus, the narrow strait linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Every ship sailing from the cold rivers of the north to the warm markets of the south had to pass beneath its walls. The Byzantines taxed each one, turning geography into profit. The city was a living crossroads of culture. Greek, Arabic, and Latin voices mixed in its bazaars. Spices from India lay beside furs from Russia, honey from the Balkans, and silk from China. The dome of Hagia Sophia gleamed above all, a reminder that faith and wealth often shared the same sky. Foreigners called Constantinople the Eye of the World, not for its beauty alone, but because all roads, rivers, and prophets seemed to lead there. Its vaults were filled with gold, its palaces with mosaics that shimmered like treasure. For centuries it stood as proof that trade could build empires as mighty as armies. Back across the seas, another jewel shone at the southern tip of Arabia, the port of Aden. Here the Red Sea met the Indian Ocean, and every ship from India, Persia, or East Africa had to pass through its narrow bay. Merchants called it the throat of trade. The air was heavy with incense and myrrh. Gold from Africa gleamed beside silk from China. The sound of sailors in a dozen languages echoed through the streets. Aden's rulers taxed every deal and kept peace within their walls. The traveler Ibn Battuta wrote that one could buy anything in Aden that humanity had ever produced. It was no exaggeration. Geography had blessed it, a crossroads of oceans, faiths, and empires. In these ports, the wealth of the world flowed endlessly, measured not just in gold, but in ideas. Languages mixed, religions mingled, and new technologies spread with the wind. The compass, the astrolabe, the art of navigation, all were born or refined in these meeting places of humanity. To sail the medieval seas was to glimpse the first threads of globalization. Each tide carried more than cargo. It carried trust, fragile yet powerful enough to link distant civilizations. From Venice to Cairo, from Calicut to Guangzhou, people learned to trade across belief, across language, across fear. Their ships were wooden, their maps imperfect, their journeys perilous. Yet they built a world connected by commerce long before the modern age. In the rhythm of waves and the cry of gulls, they discovered a truth that still shapes our world: that gold flows where people choose to meet, exchange, and believe in one another across the horizon.